Hey guys, Ray from Love RV and Boat. So this is a continuation of my review of the Bluetti AC300 plus one of the batteries. So if you missed part one, I kind of went through the features and kind of gave you a look at the physical boxes. In this one, I'm going to do a capacity test and a max charge and discharge test. I'm trying to break this review up into smaller chunks, so this will be part two of a multi-part series. So let's get to it. So first test I'm going to do is a discharge test, and we'll test out the capacity running at kind of a medium wattage load. I'm going to set this heater up for about 600 watts, and we'll see how long it takes to drain this battery, see how many watt hours we get out of the inverter. Of course, it's not going to be full capacity because they often reserve a bit of capacity in the battery, and also there's inefficiencies in the inverter, but yeah, decent test of the inverter at a kind of a medium wattage load. So we'll just go in here and turn, we're at 100%, I fully charged it, and we'll turn the AC output on. There we go, so it's started up now. And we'll just have a quick look here. It seems to put out 119.6, so about 120 volts AC, which is nice. I like when inverters put out up to 120 versus 110. Sometimes they cheat, so then you get the full wattage of things like heaters. 7.41 amps. Well, got that little turned up a little too high. There we go. 600 watts, 594 watts. 4.95 amps. 119, and we're running 60 hertz, and this thing will calculate the kilowatt hours, and I'll also run a timer to see how long it is so I can calculate it myself. Anyway, we'll let that go and see how long it lasts for us. Stay tuned. Give you a look at what the app does. Shows you battery capacity. You can see energy coming out of it and the wattage that the AC load is at. Okay, just checking in. It's at 33% left, and so far 1.75 kilowatt hours. Go down here. There's also a reading on the battery, just some indicator lights. 20%, 40%, 60%, 80% in full. Down to 1%, just about 2,400 watt hours. It's taken a long time in the last few percentage points, so we'll see. I'll record this and we'll see where it fails. Turns off that. There we go. She quit, started giving me an alarm. Alarm says D battery drained. And it ran for just over 4 hours. So the capacity turned out pretty similar to my previous tests with Bluetti products. Right around 80% is what you get out of the battery. It may say 3,000 watt hours on it, but that's the battery capacity. I think they hold back about 10% just so they don't run it down to zero, and it's able to restart and everything. And then the inverter, when you're using the inverter, it's only got about a 90% or so efficiency, so there's power lost in heat and wiring, that sort of thing. So you get about 80% of their total capacity. Now that might vary if you're going to run smaller loads for longer periods, or if you're using the DC outputs, there might be less losses, but overall it kind of gives you an impression. And I used around 600 watts because that could be kind of typical of a larger RV, what it might be using when it's running TVs and different things like that. Computers, chargers, microwaves, hot plates, kind of gives a kind of an indication. So you'd get around, it said I think around 2,400 watt hours. If you added batteries, you could up that. Each battery would have that. Gives you kind of an indication of how much power you have in that battery. Next thing I want to do is test its charging. Now, supposedly on the AC, you can charge up to 3,000 watts when you plug it into a house. Now you're going to have to plug it into, to get up to that level, you have to plug it into a 30 amp service. It comes out of the box set for max, I think 15 amps, so you'd only get around maybe 1,850 watts max. But there is a setting in here where you go into the settings and it goes max grid input power. You can see it says 30 there. I had to go into advanced mode. There's a lock there, and you have to get a password from Bluetti to allow you to change that. And I guess there's a thing that comes up and gives a disclaimer, you know, they're not, you're changing it, you take ownership of anything that goes wrong. So I'm at a friend's place and I have a 30 amp power hookup here. So I changed it to 30 amps and I'm gonna plug in, and we'll see how many watts we can get of charging power into this thing through the grid input, which is right here. So I've just connected, I'm going to connect it to a 30 amp cord that I made up to connect to it. This is just for test. I wouldn't run it long term with these smaller wires and a 20 amp plug, but should be good enough for a quick test here. Okay, here we go. I'm going to plug her in. See what happens. Starting up. Starting to ramp up in wattage. There we go. 3.0 kilowatts. See what the display says. Yes, 2,997, 3,000 watts. Wow, that's pretty impressive. So that can feed in via the grid. On the solar, you can feed up to 2,400 watts in parallel arrays. So this thing can actually charge at 5,400 watts, which is amazing. Really recharge fast for such a big battery. Seems pretty steady there. Just gonna let it go for a little while. Maybe I'll give it 5 or 10 minutes here. Just give you a look at the settings screen here. Once you enter the password they give you, you get this selection here, but you also have, oops, user defined. So say I want to have a generator that can only output, say, 1,400, or, oops, sorry. Say my generator can only handle 14 amps of output. I could go like that and set it to whichever I want, user defined, which is really handy. And they never had that before, but now they do, so I'm starting to like this Bluetti box more and more now. Okay, so we've had it running about 5 minutes there, and it's been constantly charging 3,000 watts. This cord is a little bit, I can feel some warmth to the touch now on it, because it is a fairly thin cord. Of course, the other cords are fine because they're meant for the full 30 amps. Not this though, it's just something I made up. Anyway, it proves that it can do it, and that's pretty impressive stuff. So I went in and dialed that back to 14 amps. So now it's putting in 1,600, 1,700 watts, which would be suitable for a 2,000 watt generator. I'll do a test with mine later on. But I'm just going to recharge the box, and we're going to do some tests of its inverter, see how much it can actually put out. It's a 3,000 watt inverter, so I'm going to try running a pair of heaters on it, maybe a heat gun, see how much it can handle, see if it can handle its rated maximum of 3,000 watts. Okay, so next let's load up this 3,000 watt inverter, see how it performs. Got a couple heaters here. Let's turn that one on to full. See what we got. 1.4 kilowatts. This one says 15 1500 or so watts. Okay, turn the next one on and put on 900 watts to start. Now we're at 23. 2.4 kilowatts, no problem. Let's put this one on full. 2.9 kilowatts. Says 2900 watts. Output voltage is holding steady at 120 volts. So yeah, handling it no problem. Always found the inverters in these to be quite good. So I'm going to let it run at max. Let's run it for, see if we can run it for about 15 minutes. See if it handles full load. Okay, it's about 14-minute mark. Handling it without a hitch, 2.8 kilowatts. Fan is on, blowing some warm air out the side, but no issues. So maybe let's try to see if we can overload it. I'll put on my heat gun and we'll test it out here. That should pump it up. Now we're over 3,000, 3,346. Still going. A little bit more, 3,500 watts, 38. Max it out here. There we go. Now we got an alarm. Let's see what the alarm says. Overload warning. Actually still running. It says overload warning, but it's still going. Actually powering a heat gun and 2 heaters. Wow. So turn things off here. Amazed that it's still going. So it ran it. Really good inverter in there. So I just went through some of the specs on that inverter, and now I see why it kept running. It says it can go to 3750 watts for 2 minutes. It can actually go 4500 watts for 5 seconds, and 6000 watts for half a second. That's its max surge. So quite the robust inverter in this box. Top marks for that. So far I'm very impressed with the charging capabilities of this unit, and it seems to put out quite a bit of power as well. I like that the batteries are lithium iron phosphate and that it can be expanded up to 4 batteries. So I think this is probably going to be a hit with people looking for a home backup situation. But this channel is mostly about RVs and boats, so let's take it off grid now and put it through some tests off grid and see how it works in that environment. A couple of things I can see already that would be an issue would be the sheer weight of it. Very heavy, especially the batteries. And this cable here, I'm not really a fan of that situation where they have a very stiff, thick cable, fairly short, holding them together. I understand why they have to do it, but it can be a little cumbersome in some RV situations. Anyway, let's head off grid.